wanna start a revolution. I wanna start a revolution.
Oh man, guys, you know what feels good? Coming home after a long and grim 2-year trek through the deepest, darkest, most oppressive parts of the fiat mines. This is it. The regular videos are starting again right now. Let's go. If you're finding value in the return of these videos, or if you just like images of spacemen walking in alpine meadows, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Oh man, guys. Oh man. It feels good. It feels good to be back. This was a very, very long trek through the fiat mines. I can't even express how dark and grim the fiat mines can be. How's the audio, by the way? Can you guys hear me? Is the audio coming through? Just leave a comment if you can hear the audio. Let's see. Wesley Carter, J. Marie, not rock. Mark Going. J. Marie says good. Okay, I'm gonna take that as the audio is good. NM Freak says yes. Yes, I'll go. Okay. Crunchy Cat, Jeremy. Okay, great. Thank you guys. Okay, so we are back. Let me explain for just a second. I'm not going to go on and on about the last 2 years because this channel has always been about Cardano, not about me. So we're going to keep it like that. It's going to be about Cardano. Hence me not showing up on the screen, doing the whole, talking head thing. It's going to stay the same, but we're going to try to do this as live streams for a specific reason, because I think live streams can be a little bit more sustainable, a little bit more authentic, and it allows people to actually participate in the videos like everybody's doing in the comments right now. And I intentionally didn't give this one very much notice. I didn't give everybody very much notice that this was going to happen intentionally, because we all know from past live streams, I am not good at live streaming. That is true. It is also true that I'm going to get better at live streaming. So this is sort of the first one to kind of work out all the kinks. And then we're going to get better at this as time goes on. Yep, J-Marie says, and way less editing. That is true. Way less editing. So I should be able to do, my goal is to do more videos kind of spontaneously as the news happens, because I'd like to bring you guys more real-time news. So in the past, I would do these videos and it would take a long time. I know everybody always says this, but it takes a long time to edit videos. And so often like news would happen at some part of the day. And then the normal time for the videos to come out wasn't until hours and hours and hours later. I always felt like it'd be better if the news is a little bit fresher. So we're going to try to do this live stream videos. Like I said, it's going to be bad at first, but we'll get better. So first, I think we should talk about what's been going on for the last 2 years. Like I said, we'll keep this part short, but I did exactly what I said I was going to do, what I set out to do, and what I told everybody I was going to do. And that was to make as many DCAs as I could, basically, over the last 2 years. So I sort of started this little trek through the fiat mines a little over 2 years ago. It was kind of summer of 2023. So I pretty much just took the most stressful, unsustainable, highest paying job I could to make the most and biggest DCAs for the last 2 years, because I knew we were at the bottom of the cycle. Yep, Liam says it's been that long. Yeah, it's fully been 2 years. I've been in the fiat mines, and it doesn't feel like that long because things move fast in crypto, but it's been 2 years. So I pretty much just took the super high cortisol job that paid the most money, kept my cost of living as low as possible. I did the crazy thing people talk about all the time, where you just make as much money as you can, keep your cost of living as low as humanly possible. And I mean, very, very low. And I just dumped all that into my DCAs because I knew we were at the bottom of the market. Like I've always believed, I don't think anybody really knows what's going to happen in the future of crypto. There's too many variables. We're too affected by all the macro elements. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. But what we do know is what's already happened. And so far, crypto's been on this 4-year cycle, and we were at the bottom of the cycle 2 years ago. I knew that prices weren't going to stay where they were, and it was going to be a great time to do a lot of DCAing as much as I possibly could. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years. Like I said, very high cortisol, but commensurate rewards. Was it grim and dark? Yes, but it's also over now. Now it's time to get back to what we normally do, which is this. So enough about all that. Let's actually talk about what's going on in Cardano. And it's almost hard to start this after 2 years. Let's see, Wesley says, this is a pertinent comment. Yes, I'm in the same spot. Make as much to get it out. Make as much to get it out of the system. Yep. Trying to escape the matrix. Trying to escape the matrix and not have to re-enter the fiat mines. I don't know. Nobody knows what the future is going to be. So who knows if this will work, but I'm going to try my damnedest to stay out of the fiat mines. I don't know if that's actually possible, but hopefully we'll see. So and I hope the same for all the rest of you who are maybe trying to make the same transition eventually. But so let's talk about what's going on in crypto though. So I think it's hard to figure out how to start this because so much has happened over the last 2 years. And I've made some videos here and there when I could, but there's been a lot of news we haven't covered. So let's start in what I think is still the most important spot. It was the most important thing in the last cycle, over 4 years ago when I started these videos. And I think it's still the same thing that's the most important. And that's this. Why Cardano? Here we have Charles just last month saying Cardano is going to break the internet. And for anybody who was around back in the Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen days, it probably warmed your heart to see Scottie Pippen commenting on Charles' post, bullish, which is the kind of pun you would expect from somebody in Scottie Pippen's generation, which is probably about the same as mine, but definitely a pun, but also very appropriate. And I think I knew that Scottie Pippen was kind of a Cardano fan, but the main question here is how correct Charles is. And of course, this is the same kind of mysterious, enigmatic post that amps everybody up, gets everybody going. Cardano is going to break the internet. And so when you see something like this from Charles, I think it's like it does its job. It does what it's intending to do, which is to get everybody excited, but for everybody to not really know if he just means generally, look at how great Cardano is. Cardano is so great that at some point, Cardano is going to break the internet just on its fundamental merits. We don't know if that's what he's referring to or if it's something very specific. So if you've been around this channel for a really long time, you remember before the Wyoming Cardano Summit, the Cardano Summit in, where was it? Laramie? I think that was Laramie, University of Wyoming. So before the Cardano Summit, there was some big news. We knew there was going to be some very big news revealed at the summit. We didn't know what it was. Everybody's very excited. It could have been, back in those days, anything seemed possible. It could have been anything. It turned out the big news, I mean, there were a few big news items. One of them was the Dish Network thing that was announced on stage that didn't really, we don't talk about the Dish Network anymore. I'll put it that way. So when we see something like this, if it does turn out not to just be a general comment on the merits of Cardano, if it turns out to be something very specific, you don't know if it's going to be something that really breaks the internet. Like, is it going to be something like the Google Cloud thing is just the beginning of more things involving the word Google? To me, that would be one of the best case scenarios. And I think a lot of people either got very excited about this when that news broke, or they did not get very excited. And part of the reason people who follow this channel expressed was that they, didn't necessarily like where Google stood on issues like privacy. And of course, that partnership was with Midnight. So one of the big elements of Midnight is the privacy thing. And people are like, hey, I don't exactly love the impact Google has had on my personal privacy. I can understand that. Also, if Midnight does its job, then the use of Midnight might help effectuate this transition from don't be evil to can't be evil. And this is something we've heard Charles talk about for a long time. And of course, this is a reference to the famous, wall. I think it was a wall they had at Google, and they had in giant letters, "Don't be evil." And Charles made a great point. Don't be evil pretty soon falls victim to your particular definition of evil. And when it's convenient, people will often change their definition of evil so they don't have to brand themselves as evil. But with cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology in general, our goal is to put in place things that prevent people from being evil in the first place. They can't actually be evil. So that's why I think it's exciting when we see the name Google and Cardano together, or Midnight in this case. But we don't know what this is about. This could be about a lot of different things. And I actually lean more towards this. This is probably, Charles probably has something very specific in mind. But I think whatever he actually meant when he wrote this, I think the more important thing is what's going to happen in between now and the end of the year. So the next biggest thing, I think, of course, everybody's super focused on what the Fed's going to do. We had the Fed cut rates this month, and they're probably going to cut rates again and then cut rates again before we see 2026. And of course, like pretty much everybody in crypto knows, this is the fourth quarter of the fourth year of the crypto cycle. So everybody's really focused on those kinds of macro elements. What is that all going to mean for crypto? Is it going to pump our bags? Are we going to have those moon Lambos? Am I going to have the moon Lambo parked in front of my joint so that all the ladies see the moon Lambo? I mean, that's at some base level, that's going to the mind of every single person in Cardano. So here, CrunchyCat makes a good point. CrunchyCat says, this tweet didn't come from him. A lot of other Cardano accounts were trying to make a trend, and then Charles tweeted it too, ? Yeah, I mean, it's something like that. I mean, it's something we say about everything on Twitter. On X, blank is going to break the internet. It's something we see all the time. But I think we can all agree, I think Charles really believes it. So the question, though, do we have something more to look forward to in Cardano and in crypto in general, beyond just Jerome Powell prancing out on stage and giving us the rate cut we've all been looking forward to for so long? So I think we do. And you've seen Charles talk about this in recent interviews, including the interview with Bloomberg. He was really focused on this one issue. And I think this is part of the genius of the way Cardano has been run. So a quick note on that. We probably need to give Charles a break, man. Like Charles is a very passionate man, and he responds. He responds to a lot of the negativity. Famously, notoriously, he responds to a lot of the negativity that he sees on X and on Reddit and everywhere that all of us in crypto go. We probably need to give Charles a break, because Charles is a human being. He has strengths and weaknesses. You could argue him being such a passionate individual is both a strength and a weakness, but we probably need to give him a break because he's done some pretty genius things. I mean, when I got into crypto, Cardano, I was buying Cardano in 2018 below 3 cents. I was DCAing into Cardano below 3 cents. And during that time, due to the things that Charles did, really due to the things that Charles did for Cardano, Cardano went from below 3 cents to above $3 in that last cycle. And now here we are with Cardano way, way, way above 3 cents. So is that much help to anybody who got into Cardano much later? Somebody who got into Cardano at $3? No, it's not. But Charles has done some genius things that still haven't actually come to fruition. He's sort of front loaded a lot of work into the Cardano ecosystem, into things that maybe aren't as visible. People talk all the time about, adoption and, TVL. We've talked about this a million times on this channel. How come we don't have more, of X type of DeFi platforms, in Cardano, all these kinds of questions. But I think there's some more fundamental things. There's some more fundamental things that will affect the Cardano blockchain ecosystem even more than, how many of, X trendy thing, how many meme coins above a certain market cap do we have? How many, X type of DeFi platforms? Back in the day, it's always some kind of, latest trend. Back in the day, it was, PFP, NFTs. Before that, going clear back, we had an ICO craze. There's always some trend in crypto, but I think there's some much more fundamental things that are going to affect crypto in the near future for us. And these trends will continue taking place. There will always be these trends. More recently was meme coins. Before that, it was PFP NFTs. Animal NFTs. But there's some more fundamental things. I think this is probably, and this is one of the things that Charles talked the most about in his recent Bloomberg interview. I'm not going to play the interview because big networks like Bloomberg, they're not famous for loving it when you use their content in your videos. That can cause problems, but we'll just talk about the actual substance of the thing, and that's this. So we all remember the beginnings, the first glimmers of hope of better, more common sense regulation for Cardano and for crypto in general. Crypto has been one of the most mistreated, I'll call it a movement. People hate it sometimes if we refer to the crypto industry because they feel like crypto is a movement. And I certainly agree with that. Sometimes it's easy just use the shorthand of industry, but crypto, whatever you want to call it, has been maybe more mistreated by regulators, especially in the last administration. I think, no matter what side of the political spectrum you fall on, we can all agree the previous SEC was not a friend of crypto. And there was this crazy irony about that because prior to him becoming the head of the SEC, Gary Gensler was teaching classes at MIT, if I remember right, that were very, seemed like he'd be pretty pro crypto and he knew a lot about crypto. But his SEC under that prior administration was very, very, very intentionally unfriendly to crypto. Now we're in much friendlier water. But even during those unfriendly days, we saw the beginnings of this right here. So earlier this year, we saw the Clarity Act make it through the House of Representatives, by a large margin. The Genius Act and the Clarity Act, they both passed with great numbers. The Genius Act, which the Genius Act passed, something like 300 and something, like 308 to 126. Those aren't the actual numbers, but it was something on that order of magnitude. And the Clarity Act passed. It was almost 300 and also, 100 and something nay votes. So they both passed with great numbers through the House. But of course, going way back, you remember that all this started with Senators Gillibrand and Lummis. They were sort of the first members of Congress that really stepped up and said, hey, we're going to try to tackle this whole crypto regulation thing. We're going to try to come up with some reasonable regulations for crypto. And we covered pretty much every single iteration of those regulatory schemes on this channel. So they had different names and we covered sort of all of the different, reincarnations of this idea. But the idea at base is really, can we have reasonable regulation? And it sort of comes from this premise that crypto is good. And in the past, there were only so many senators or representatives who were actually willing to publicly embrace the idea, this premise that crypto is good. But Lummis and Gillibrand were two who probably most notably stepped up, certainly in the Senate, but I mean, really in the entire crypto space. Adam makes a good point. Africa Summit was a huge letdown. Digital identity. Yep, we all remember the Africa stuff. That was a big part of the lead up to the Wyoming Summit. I agree 100%. So those things will always be going on in every ecosystem, including Cardano. There will always be a Dish network. There will always be T-Mobile. There will always be a government in Africa who's, has a cryptographer for a head of state who's willing to embrace crypto, and then later gets embroiled in a civil war. There are always going to be those things going on. And I'm not trying to express any kind of political opinion on what happened with that civil war, but there will always be those kind of things going on. But this is the kind of thing that's not really a macroeconomics thing, but it's so impactful, it might as well be a macroeconomic trend. The reasonable regulation of crypto is something that's probably going to affect crypto more than anything else. Who's chair of the Fed and whether or not they're willing to cut, or they're cutting at the wrong time, if they're cutting too late, cutting too early, whatever it is, that'll always happen. The little micro trends inside each ecosystem, those things will always happen too. But this is the kind of thing that only happens, every once in a while. Crypto going from being this like, hey, maybe it's good, or maybe it's an outlaw thing that should be smashed, which was kind of the battle that was happening during the last administration, to what's happening right now. Prior to this, we had like I said, Lummis, Gillibrand, a few other senators, eventually sort of jumped on board. And then we had a bunch of people in the House who certainly became big allies of crypto. Now they can kind of get this stuff passed. So the Clarity Act passed in the House. Now it's going to go back to the Senate. But this whole crypto reasonable regulation thing, it's kind of the baby of Lummis and Gillibrand. So they're not going to be able to turn around and just pass the Clarity Act. Instead, let's just say it like it is. They're going to rewrite everything, according to their own view of the world. And then that's going to go back to the House, and the House is going to have to agree to those changes. I think this is what everybody's been expecting. So we don't end up with the Clarity Act just going directly to the Senate and there being a vote one day, and then we all pop bottles. Instead, what we get is the Clarity Act passing the House, the same sort of set of ideas going to the Senate, and it being relabeled something like this: the Reasonable Financial Innovation Act of 2025. I believe this is the discussion draft that was dropped, I believe, on September 5th out of the Senate Banking Committee. What's so interesting about the Senate Banking Committee is we've got members like Senator Lummis, who certainly is almost the most interested in crypto. And then we've got the head of the Senate Banking Committee, who is currently Tim Scott. Who is boys with Tim Scott? Who has spent a ton of time trying to get to know Tim Scott? It's your buddy Charles. So Charles, you'll notice if you go back through his X account, you'll notice a lot of pictures of him talking to or talking about Tim Scott. And this is part of the genius of Charles, and why I think the whole community should cut Charles a lot more slack, because Charles is thinking several moves ahead of the rest of the crypto space. And he's been doing this for years. He knew that the big transition in crypto was not going to be, the latest adoption by X company, the latest partnership with this country, or this company, or this, gaming platform. It's not the, sudden trendiness of NFTs or meme coins. All of those are things, but the real thing is crypto going from possible outlaw status to being a legitimate part of the mainstream economic system. That's what this is. And he's you've noticed, we've talked about it on this channel many times, he spent a huge amount of his time over the last several years focused on exactly this. So it's easy to forget. We could have had a founder like Charles. And yes, there were 3 founding entities, IO, Emergo, and the CF, and they've all done their thing. And the other entities deserve some credit too. But let's face it, Charles is the most visible, and I think we can all agree the most impactful over the last several years has certainly been IO and Charles. And Charles is the face of Cardano, whether people like it or not. And some people do hate Charles. Some people do not like Charles. But I think Charles deserves a lot of credit. And maybe one of the most genius things he's done is this: spent a lot of time with the right people, including the senator who is currently the head of the Senate Banking Committee, Tim Scott. Also, Charles has since Cardano kind of started, since I got into Cardano, he has devoted a huge amount of economic and other energies to the state of Wyoming. Senator Lummis, of course, is a senator from Wyoming. So Charles has kind of put all of his, we'll just call it lobbying, all of his lobbying energy in the right places. So I'm not saying what he's been doing, matches the statutory regulatory definition of lobbying. What I'm saying is he's been talking to the right people about Cardano quite a bit the last few years. And you'll notice, I mean, we've gone through this many times. I haven't gone through this new discussion draft, but I think what we're going to find when we do go through this discussion draft is that Cardano is sitting quite pretty in terms of these new regulations. And the big distinction in the past with these bills has always been, are you going to be a commodity, or are you going to be an investment contract that is a security? And what we found when we've gone through these in the past is that a lot of even the big blue chip, high market cap cryptocurrencies, they start looking a lot more like the securities definitions in these bills. And you notice Cardano has done all the right things to actually meet the definition of commodity under these bills. And commodity is definitely where you want to be under these types of bills. And Charles kind of points that out in this post right here. This is a more recent, nope, this is slightly more recent, September 26th. But I thought this was a good all-encompassing post. So Charles said, the road to Omega is full of challenges and surprises, but it will solve the pillar of scalability once and for all. I think you all know what that's going to be. That's going to be LEOS, or as we used to call it, input endorsers. Midnight and partner chains give us interoperability. And I mean, Midnight is an IO product, so he's got to talk about Midnight. Midnight and partner chains give us interoperability, and we are well on our way to governance being recursively self-improving. And I think this has been part of the thesis for Cardano all this time. So the rest of the blockchain space has really been, going clear back to 2018. I've been in crypto since, I think I bought Bitcoin for the first time in, I can't remember if it was 2013 or 2014, but I kind of got in. I started getting really interested in crypto probably in 2012. And during that whole time, but especially since Cardano has existed since 2017, 2018 period, the rest of the blockchain space, the rest of the crypto space has really been pretending to meet the blockchain trilemma. The blockchain trilemma, of course, is trying to achieve optimal decentralization, scaling, and security simultaneously, or at least contemporaneously. And a lot of the rest of the space, I mean, you could almost argue the rest of the space has consistently failed at that. We've got the robbery forest. A lot of blockchain ecosystems like Ethereum, whom I think most people would point to as the, obviously proponents of Ethereum would point to Ethereum as, sort of being an optimal compromise on the 3 legs of the blockchain trilemma. But we've nicknamed it the robbery forest because it does so poorly with security. It does terribly with security. Liam makes a good point here. There's a pattern of genius being considered abrasive. Linus Torvald, Steve Jobs. Certainly, that is certainly the case in tech. We've certainly seen that. Geobum says adult autism for the win. Also true. I mean, we've got a lot of autists who have produced great things for us. But while the rest of the space has been pretending, like Ethereum, I think we can say Ethereum has fallen short on security. Ethereum has also fallen short on scaling. And this is the part that the Ethereum people would hate. I believe Ethereum has fallen way short on decentralization. You can see this when you look at the Nakamoto coefficient, which we've covered many, many times on this channel. And Ethereum also famously, notoriously, is constantly falling short on scaling according to its own users. When they have to pay those gigantic gas fees because things are a little congested, they get a little pissed. Also, they've got the lockup queues to get out of their lockups. They have these gigantic queues, so because they've got the non-self-custodied staking. There's so many problems with Ethereum. We've covered it a million times on this channel. But my point is, I think Cardano is going for something even beyond what the rest of the space is pretending to do. We've also got, all these other blockchain ecosystems doing various things. And most of them, the latest trend of the last 5 years has definitely been to just not even do the decentralization thing. So I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to get into fights right now with the proponents of those other blockchain ecosystems. We've got some blockchain ecosystems who have very high market caps right now, and they've just pretended to be decentralized. They use the word all the time. They talk about decentralization like it's this beautiful cloak, this beautiful golden cloak they're wearing, when in fact they're not decentralized at all. And we have measurements for that. We've got the Edinburgh Decentralization Index. And it pretty much shows us exactly how decentralized all these blockchain ecosystems are. And in fact, they're just not decentralized. I mean, they're more decentralized than my laptop. I'm the only one who uses my laptop that I know of. It's definitely not decentralized. It's all me. They're more decentralized than my laptop, but that's about it. Maybe if I had a file cabinet that had like 2 people using it, they would still be more decentralized than my file cabinet. But in a lot of cases, that's it. So they're like more decentralized than my laptop and more decentralized than like a file cabinet. But that's about it. So while everybody else is pretending in one way or another to meet the blockchain trilemma, Cardano is really going for what I would call the blockchain quadlemma, with 4 legs. So the other leg, besides decentralization, scaling, and security, I would argue, is liberty. Why are we really in crypto? It's for more liberty. We want more freedom. We want freedom and liberty. It's not a coincidence that some of the biggest Western governments in the world, have liberty in their, national mottos in various languages. There's always this reference to liberty. It's because all humans basically crave this one thing, liberty. And I would argue a lot of the blockchains are basically setting up feudal states that are, fairly autocratic. They're not really, they're pretty dictatorial. And in Cardano, we've gone so deep on this 4th leg that a lot of the other blockchains aren't even addressing. And a lot of them are probably going to get hurt in the coming reasonable regulation. This is how this ties back into what's happening on the regulation front, why that's so important, because self-governance is something that's being discussed quite a bit. Like, is there governance in this blockchain? And in some of the biggest blue chip ecosystems, I mean, let's face it, pretty much all of them, there is no governance. You can argue in Bitcoin, it's like, we already know, everybody knows the famous mechanism. Anybody can fork it, but if the miners don't point their mining rigs at this new fork, the new fork is going to fall away into the mist. It's not going to be very important at all. That's the way it works with Bitcoin. And, you can argue that's a form of governance. But look, I'm not sitting in a warehouse full of mining rigs. I don't have, millions and millions of dollars of mining rigs behind me as I record this. Probably neither do you. Maybe some of you do, but not many. We're not those miners. I've held Bitcoin, since 2013, 2014. Have I ever been asked to vote on a goddamn thing? Hell no. Before I owned Cardano, I owned Ethereum. Was I ever asked to vote on anything in Ethereum? Not at all. Never asked to vote on a damn thing. Never asked to appoint somebody to vote on my behalf. It was the miners deciding everything. And oh, there's a little Netflix ad. It was the miners appointing everything, and the miners deciding everything, or a foundation. And you'd think, oh, okay, foundations are okay as long as you get to vote for whoever's on the foundation. I was never asked to vote in any of these blockchains for any member of any foundation. I've never been asked that question. Who are you going to vote for a foundation seat? Never been asked. There are blockchains where that happens, but it's not really any of these big ones. We just don't have governance. That fourth leg of the trilemma. I mean, it's easy to say, it's easy to show how these blockchains have ignored decentralization for the sake of scaling, and they've ignored security for the sake of scaling. They've really, really ignored liberty and governance. They haven't even tried. They don't want to try. They don't want governance. They don't want self-governance. They want an autocratic state. They want to remain in control. And this is part of the larger genius, I think, of what Charles has done. He gave up control. He gave it back to us. You know, that's probably a load of effort off his shoulders, but he also did it because it's the right thing to do. And coincidentally, it fits into the coming regulation. Governance is mentioned in all these bills, which is a huge problem for the blockchains that don't have governance. And I think the senators are kind of going to run into a problem as the senators get ready to pass this bill. And, you know, they have guys like Charles, you know, saying things like, hey, what about governance? They've, you know, got to decide, are we going to reward governance, liberty, or are we going to let these other blockchains slide? So I think we all know that at the end, the other blockchains, there's so much money involved and so much Wall Street money in these other blockchains. They're going to figure out how to get the senators to let, you know, the whole governance thing slide a little bit. So they're going to figure out a way to get in there. Maybe they'll just be named in the bill. Maybe we'll end up with the names of certain blockchains that are just kind of exempted from, you know, from the governance, you know, any governance provisions. We'll see how all that pans out. But part of the genius that I think we've been the beneficiaries of Charles and IO, is that they've actually done all the things. We don't have to talk anybody into letting us slide on the governance thing, because we actually did governance. And as you've all noticed, it's pretty hard. We all knew it was going to be hard. It's definitely hard. So, okay. Crunchy Cat says, Midnight just needs to launch at this point. Them longing out the claim process wasn't necessary. We'll talk about that. This is probably not the right video for that, but we should talk about the whole Midnight launch process. I think there's pluses and negatives to it, but it is novel. You know, the whole this whole glacier drop process is definitely novel. They didn't use somebody else's technology. So another one of the big things, I think, so I really think people still underestimate. I know I talk about the regulation thing all the time. It's something I focus on this channel. I talk about it all the time, but I think it really is one of the biggest, most impactful things that's going to happen in the next little bit. Another big thing that's happening is, of course, something we've talked about for a long, long time. That is input endorsers, which we now call LEOs. This goes clear back to the time of our temporary fill-in CTO, who was at John Woods, who went to, where did he go? Algorand. I think he went to Algorand after the sort of IO CTO or head developer came back and replaced him. He was sort of a temporary fill-in, was a great communicator. He gave, I think, one of the great early explanations of exactly what input endorsers would be. And here we're actually seeing the IO team doing all the work and doing all the work on input endorsers and giving us these updates every single month. Every single month, there's like a Laos R&D monthly review and demo. And we get to see these beautiful charts explaining exactly what John Woods talked about all those years ago, exactly what Charles has talked about many, many times. We've got the endorsement blocks, the input blocks. John Woods famously described this as a heartbeat that sort of sounds like boom, 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 and how this could be done in various ways to have some sort of parallel, some notions that are similar to parallel processing. I know there's some debate right now. You'll notice there's some debate right now on X whether the current incarnation of Laos is exactly fitting into that early mold or not. But everybody sort of agrees that Laos is going to be this crazy, crazy input in scaling for Cardano. What has been the big knock on Cardano all these years? It's been the speed thing. It's been our throughput. It's been the transactions per second. And we've come up with a million ways to counter that argument. You know, we've been talking about transactions per second, which I think is totally valid. And it's a really good, it's a really good explanation of why our TPS is what it is. But also, if input endorsers, Laos, does what it's supposed to, we won't even have to make that argument. It'll just be sort of bonus because our TPS would actually be much, much higher. So you can see here, here's Sebastian Nagel, who I've talked about before on this channel. He says, a couple of months ago, I got appointed as a lead architect on the Laos project at IOE. After spending most of summer working with the extraordinary Laos R&D team discussing protocol variants, we published the new Laos SIP 164 4 weeks ago. So he's giving us, the guy who's in charge of the Laos development, the lead architect on Laos, is giving us these updates every month. We're hearing about Laos, and I think, I'm not sure if it's in this, somewhere I saw, I've been seeing people predicting like a 30 to 55x increase in the Laos scaling. Here's a good comment. So MH Matthews says, this is what I mean. Nobody in Cardano does a video showing and explaining it. I've probably, at a very technical level, you're exactly right. I've talked about input endorsers over the years many, many times, but you're right. We probably need somebody to do a very, very, very technical breakdown of how Laos is going to work and communicate that in a way that people can understand. So, you know, that's definitely, we need somebody on the inside to kind of come in and answer the questions on that. But that's probably a great subject for a future video. So we've got this input endorsers coming. It's going to solve the part of the blockchain trilemma that we were always discredited for, the scaling part. I think everybody agrees Cardano doing great on security. Cardano certainly doing fantastic on decentralization. It's always been scaling. How come not more TPS? You know, which is kind of it's a difficult argument to overcome because Cardano was obviously approaching this from the perspective of decentralization first, which is why I'm here. I'm here because Cardano is decentralization first. I would be in another blockchain. Solana certainly has taken a different route on scaling versus decentralization. But this is going to solve, if things turn out the way we've been told they're going to turn out with Laos, this is going to be a hugely impactful on that scaling leg. And then we've already moved beyond that. We've already moved beyond the trilemma. Now we're talking about this quad lemma that involves governance, and nobody's doing a damn thing on governance among the big blockchains outside of Cardano. Yes, I know there are blockchains in the top 50 that have governance. I know people will jump in and tell me all about the fantastic governance in whatever chain they're holding their bags because they want to pump their bags. I know it exists, but I don't think anybody's doing it as optimally as Cardano's doing it. So what else have we got going on in the ecosystem? I really think those are the two big things. Input endorsers finally coming to fruition, and the regulation finally becoming reasonable, and Cardano having premeditated fitting into this new regulatory scheme, which I think is really probably the biggest stroke, non-technical stroke of genius in the Cardano ecosystem, which is certainly due to Charles and IO. But those are probably the two big things. Are either of them going to affect this cycle? If we think this cycle, this is the fourth year of the cycle, and the fourth year is when all the fun happens, which has been the way it's happened in the past. Are we going to see any of that in time for this cycle? Not the input endorsers part. Ouroboros Laos is not going to be impactful to this cycle. The regulation thing, I think, will be, because we're going to get something that looks like the Clarity Act, whether it's called the Clarity Act or what were they calling this bill in the Senate? The Responsible Financial Innovation Act of 2025. We're going to see something. We're going to see something finally get through. There's Cardano. Oh, let's see. There's Cardano. Let's go. Adam Olson. Talking about Agalos Kiais, Charles a couple of years ago. Yep, certainly an unimpeachable source of technical information. That is absolutely true. But we're going to see something like this, and it's probably going to have an impact on this cycle. So in the Bloomberg video, Charles was basically saying, hey, magical things are going to happen as soon as this gets passed, and we're going to be in this period where the Fed is cutting rates. I think all of that is going to happen, and those are the most important things happening. One of those two things, between input endorsers and something like this bill passing, only one of those is going to affect this cycle. I think if this cycle ends in this fourth year of the cycle, it's this bill is going to be the big thing. Ouroboros Leos, all this stuff, this is for next cycle. Like a lot of the things you see people talking about in Cardano right now, next cycle. So 2029 is when this stuff is going to be important. This cycle, I think it's really this. This is like the equivalent of a gigantic macroeconomic tidal wave. This is like all the giant financial entities defaulting because of their credit default swap problems in the great financial crisis. Like for crypto, this is that big of a tidal change. MH Matthews points out another thing, ETFs. Yeah, I think ETFs are kind of, I mean, this is a part of this bigger trend of Wall Street embracing crypto, which I think is only really happening because this is happening. So Wall Street is embracing crypto because we've moved from this quasi outlaw status to this status where they're passing bills like this. So I think the ETFs are more of a symptom of this larger trend than they are a standalone thing. But yeah, I mean, a Cardano ETF is going to be impactful. So I think ETFs are going to be a big thing we're going to be paying a lot of attention to. So what else have we got going on? So I think those are the two big things. One of them impacting 2029. One of them probably impacting this cycle. This is the monster. This is the monster for this cycle, I think, really for all of crypto. But Cardano is going to be especially well impacted by it, I think. So what else have we got going on? This is probably, here's something that didn't receive a ton of hype. This is pretty big. Cardano and Brave browser. We've kind of heard rumblings that, they were talking to Brave. Here we see Brave's 100 million users can now access the full Cardano ecosystem. IOHK and Brave have completed the Cardano integration, the Brave wallet delivering seamless multi-chain choice and privacy-first experience. This is a pretty big deal. Anytime you have any platform with 100 million users, being able to suddenly use ADA inside their platform, that's a pretty big deal. I think that's a big one. And here we have, people always question any partnership announced by anybody, basically. They always question how the other side of that partnership actually views it. So here you have Brave saying, big news, Cardano is now fully integrated into the Brave browser. You can manage assets, execute transactions, and participate in governance in the browser without an extension. Just use Brave's built-in wallet. So I think that's a pretty big deal. So, and the Brave browser has been one of those things kind of like underappreciated in crypto, because even though it's always been sort of this crypto related thing, because it's a browser that normal people use, we almost look at it as being like sort of outside of crypto, even though it's a crypto thing. It's like one of the most successful crypto things, really. The Brave browser, crypto related things we'll call it, but we almost think about it as being outside of crypto, which is kind of a weird phenomenon. So here we have the other big partnership going on right now. And here's where people start hating that word partnership, because we have this thing that was announced as a partnership by, It was heralded as a partnership by the Cardano ecosystem. And this is with Google Cloud. And the second you say that and you mention, hey, they're going to be running a midnight validator. This is, supposedly a partnership with Midnight. They're going to be running a midnight validator, and, developers in a certain program with Google Cloud will get like 200K in credits with Google Cloud. So immediately people jump on this and say, that's not really a partnership. Anybody can get that cloud credit deal, sure. But my attitude on this is anytime we see the word Cardano alongside one of the biggest tech companies in the world, that's a good thing for the reasons we talked about earlier in this video. It's a good thing for Cardano, for adoption, and you hope, and it's a good thing for sort of the tech world in general because of the shift from don't be evil to can't be evil. So here we have another new emerging trend. So I think everybody would agree what we're kind of seeing right now with the advent of governance and DReps and everything that's going on there, we're seeing IOG, not really taking a step back, but acknowledging that we're now in this multipolar DRep run ecosystem. And there are two other founding entities. And in a more multipolar world, we're seeing them start to step up a lot more. Here we see the Cardano Foundation doing something I think we all welcome, unveiling a roadmap for Cardano adoption. So they say 8 figures ADA for stablecoin liquidity, DeFi liquidity initiative support, 220 million aided delegation to new DReps, 10 million plus real world asset launch, 2 million aided the venture hub, expanded promotion and adoption. It's great. I think regardless of how you feel about these individual initiatives within this roadmap for adoption, just the fact that the Cardano Foundation has a roadmap for adoption is a pretty big change. It's a pretty big change for Cardano. And I think something we all welcome. So this brings us to the topic of governance, which is the most sort of drama-filled thing going on in Cardano. So there's a lot of different things to be discussed under this overall banner of governance. And I think it's kind of going exactly like everybody thought it would go. So you've got a big pot of money, a big cauldron of gold coins, and there are a lot of projects. And of course, they're all being economically rational. They all want to get a handful of those gold coins. Some people want very, very, very big handfuls. Some people want just a single coin, So we've got sort of a spectrum of people trying to remove coins from that cauldron of gold coins owned by the community. And there's a lot of drama over it because it's kind of a binary win-lose thing for those ecosystems. When they put a withdrawal request into the DReps, whether it passes or not literally means them getting free money or not getting free money, and sometimes it's a straight up grant, sometimes it's a loan, various ways they're going to go about it, but everybody's trying to get some money out of that pot. So here's really how I approach all of this. I think about it mostly in terms of this. So we've got a certain amount of money in the treasury, and there are certain amounts of money we can remove from the treasury, and those amounts will be sustainable over a certain number of years. And there are other amounts we can remove from the treasury every single year that are not really sustainable on anything that looks like a long-term timeline. Like here you can see if we remove 375 million ADA from the treasury every year, guess what? In 8 years, no, less than 8 years, we have in a little over, 7 years, we have no money left. We have no money left in the treasury. And people, instantly are like, yeah, but transaction fees will go up if everybody does their job. Watch this. Okay, watch that. Watch this line down here. Watch what happens to this line down here as I make the transaction fees go up. It moves, but just barely. Look at this. If we're at, current levels, let's be charitable here. Let's say 70K. we're running out in that, a little over 7 years and a couple months. Let's say we go from 70K up to, let's 10x it, up to 700K. We run out a couple months later. It's only a couple months difference. I 10x'd the transaction fees, and it only makes a difference of a couple of months. That's because this amount is so much. 375 million per year is so much to take out of the treasury every single year. So let's take it back to 70. Let's sort of use 70K as our transaction fee baseline. And let's bring it down. Now watch this. We move from 375 to 217. It's off the chart. Look at this. Our sustainability goes far past 2035. So even if we go to 300 million per year, at least we last until almost 2035. But the point is, there are certain amounts we can spend out of the treasury and we just run out of money. And there are a lot of arguments you can make about this. You can say, hey, yeah, but this is denominated in ADA, and if things go our way, ADA will be worth a lot more money in the future. I think Liam Liam put it well here. He said what's in the back of everyone's minds. But you can argue a lot of different things. Transaction fees will go up. ADA will be worth way more money. We'll, take the treasury and, put it into other assets, whatever your plan is for making these spending levels more sustainable. The history of governance and spending is that governments just spend more and more money every year. They usually just spend more and more money every year. They don't suddenly start spending less unless they're Argentina. So things have to get real bad before they spend less. And in, the rest of the Western governments, you don't see that. You don't see this reduction in spending. You might get a tiny reduction if somebody, campaigns purely on this let's spend less money kind of thing. You might see a reduction in spending, but it's very rare you see a reduction in spending. You usually see an increase in spending. And the reason is there's so much pressure from the people getting the money, right? What's going on right now in Cardano is we're spending on a lot of really important infrastructure things. And I think everybody understands how important we spend the money on the infrastructure stuff. But then you have a lot of projects that also just want the money. And they're going to tell you how important it is that they get the money no matter what. And they've got $1 million. They're doing the rational thing. They're doing everything they can to get that money. And there's, very intense campaigns to shame anybody who won't go along with them getting the money they want, and even just delaying getting the money until next year is unacceptable to a lot of these projects. Some of them, yes, are being very reasonable and they understand when the community isn't willing to give them the money, but this is exactly what happens with governments throughout history. Special interests want the money, and they're able to pressure the policymakers, the people with the power of the purse. They're able to pressure them in every way possible. And eventually they get the money and the governments just spend more and more money. So in the case of Cardano, you can argue maybe this tempo.vote, calculator is wrong, but I haven't seen anybody explain how, spending up in this neighborhood is like sustainable without them somehow claiming that we're going to spend less. Like, I haven't heard anybody explain how anything up in this level is sustainable without them saying we're going to spend less in, absolute dollar figures. Because it seems like the history is that governments just spend more and more in both absolute figures and in terms of proportion of revenue. So that's what's going on in governance right now. I think it's actually not as interesting as there's a lot of drama. So people are very interested in it because there's a lot of drama involved in governance always, and especially with, exercise of the power of the purse. I think the most important thing though is the DRep should not abdicate the power of the purse. Like there are certain proposals where the DReps would just hand a bunch of money to an unelected group who would then disperse the money to who they want. I think the most important thing is the DReps not abdicate the power of the purse. If the DReps vote that a certain project should get money, then that project should get that money regardless of what any individual DRep believes. Even my own beliefs about sustainability of budget spending, if the community wants to spend the money and the DReps vote for it, that's great. But I think one of the more fundamental things is that the DRep should not abdicate the power of the purse. The DRep should be deciding. And we've also got these proposals like having an executive in Cardano. And what I think happens if we have an executive branch in Cardano, there are certain good administrative things about that. They can kind of wrangle budgets a little more optimally, a little more efficiently than the DReps as a group. But also, I think an executive sort of embodied by either a single person or a group of people are going to be much more susceptible to the lobbying. It's going to be a lot easier to lobby a single executive or a small, panel of executives than it is going to be to lobby the DReps. So I think the DRep should actually not abdicate the power of the purse. I think this is one of the most important things going on in Cardano governance right now. Whether or not we fund individual projects, that's just, individual policy decisions. The individual DReps will vote how they believe, and they should communicate what they believe, which is what I've tried to do in all those cases. But I think funding individual projects is probably not as important as whether or not the spending level is sustainable. And it's also not as important as the DReps not abdicating the power of the purse. So those are my feelings on that. We won't spend too much time on this. Somebody has already pointed out something fun. We're going to finish with something fun here. It's this. Somebody says, I see maps, and they probably see the letters CORN. So I know people have strong feelings about metaverses right now. Everybody knows I love them. I do love them. I won't deny I love metaverses. And I have to admit, Cornucopias has delivered something very, I don't even have to admit, I'm happy to admit that I'm happy to proclaim that Cornucopias has delivered something that we haven't seen ever in crypto. And that's a novel way to allocate the lands in a metaverse. And also, people have been in the game. People have been in the game for a long, long time, running around, putting videos on the internet, showing a lot of the awesome things that are going on in cornucopias. So it looks amazing. It's a beautiful world. I believe the entire land claim process is over. So there are sort of like 3 worlds. And by the way, I don't have any relationship with cornucopias. I love those guys, but there's no like economic relationship. I'm just really happy that somebody is delivering, appears to be delivering on the sort of the promise of metaverses. And maybe the prospect of a metaverse actually being delivered that would be fun to be inside. So there are sort of like 3 land zones in cornucopias. I'm not going to go into much detail because the cornucopias team does a great job with their Copy cafes. You should go watch those if you want details on cornucopias. But I thought I would show everybody where I'm hanging out in cornucopias, if it's useful information to anybody. So all of my lands in cornucopias. Sorry, it's a little slow to manipulate this with the live stream going on. So all of my lands in cornucopias are here in Warden's Watch, and there are still. So the land claim is over. I understand there are going to be additional claims for some of the unclaimed land, and there is unclaimed land in Warden's Watch, which is part of why I picked it. A lot of the stuff in a lot of the cool spots in Solace 1 were under so much pressure. It was so difficult to get those. And I didn't go out and buy a bunch of mythic plots or, very, very expensive plots. I just kind of drew three plots, and whatever class of plot I drew, that's what I drew. And then I just kind of put them all in here because I thought it was better to go someplace where it was actually possible to grab cool plots rather than go to the highest pressured spot where everybody spent large amounts of money to get their deeds. So anyways, I'm in Warden's Watch over here. I'm really looking forward to what this all becomes. Like I haven't played inside cornucopias. I haven't actually gone inside and explored the world. Obviously, this is just an alpha. You can kind of walk around the world, but it's just an open world for you to walk around. But it looks amazing. The only reason I haven't gone inside cornucopias and actually played is because I'm not a PC guy. So I think I'm actually gonna have to get a PC just to go in and play the game, which I'll do eventually. I've kind of been putting off getting a PC for as long as possible. And I always kind of knew I'd have to get one for cornucopias. So maybe that time is coming soon. We'll see. In the next couple years, I think I'm gonna have to get a PC just so I can actually experience cornucopias. But much credit to the cornucopias team. It was great to see them use such a novel mechanism to distribute the parcels in the 3 cornucopia zones. It was actually pretty seamless. I mean, you knew when each size of plot and each area was going to be claimed. There was a schedule, and everything seemed to run on schedule, at least that I saw. So I thought that was great. But this is all we're going to cover. Yeah, land grab was amazing. I definitely agree with that. It was definitely the least chaotic of any metaverse, allotting of the parcels I'd ever seen. So much credit to the cornucopias team. I really hope this project takes off. Geobum says it's hilarious. First time getting a PC is to play this game. You're an Enigma wrapped in a burrito. Yeah. So I had a lot of PCs back in the day, and I've had to use PCs very recently for work. But in my personal life, because of I think having to work so much with PCs, in my personal life, I do not have PCs just because I like to keep those frustrations as part of my work life, my fiat mining life, as opposed to my personal life. So I do not have the PCs at home, but I think you're right. I think I'm gonna have to get one for cornucopias. Okay. Adam Olson says something that a lot of people are probably feeling. Can't wait for what content you got going on, but spare me the metaverse. Probably there are going to be cornucopias videos in the future. I know some people, because cornucopia was kind of the big trend. It was kind of the big trend for the last cycle. It was one of the big trends. It did what trends do. I think a lot of people probably share that sentiment, Adam, but I still love them. I've always loved them. So probably when I do get a PC, I'll probably do some more of those videos where I just kind of walk through a metaverse and explore it. Feel free to not watch those. I know some people are not interested in that, but some people are. So there'll probably be videos on in the future, but of course, this is always going to be sort of a Cardano, global channel, as it's always been. So it'll be that way. But thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. This was kind of a sort of a dry run of these live videos. Let me know in the comments if you like the live format. And of course, the live format, doing it live every time, kind of lends itself to doing interviews, which I think would be really interesting. There are a lot of very fascinating personalities in Cardano. So I think doing the live format will make it easier. If we do live all the time or quite often, it'll make it easier to do interviews as well. So let me know if you like the live videos. And this is going to be, I don't know how sustainable for what period of time it'll be to do this. I'm going to try to make this channel sustainable again. It probably was never actually crypto videos. I won't belabor this point much, but doing crypto YouTube it's either very hard to make sustainable or very easy. So if you compromise your principles, it can be very, very sustainable. And I think you all know in the last cycle, that was something I didn't do. Like there were a lot of people, doing, 10,000 PFP NFT collections, and there've been people doing meme coins who cover crypto and all those things. There's a million ways people can, grab a lot of cash doing stuff like that. As I refused to do any of that stuff last cycle, I'll refuse to do it again this cycle. So we'll see how long term this can be doing the videos. But for now, because of the journey through the fiat mines and the new emergence, for now, this is going to be back to the regular videos. We'll see how long we can make it last. But thank you everybody for tuning in tonight. Like I said, dry run. I'm going to get better at doing this. Hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know in the comments if you like it, if you don't like it, if you prefer the other video format. I'm probably going to stick with this regardless, but just let me know what you think. And thank you so much for tuning in. I hope everybody is looking forward to a fantastic week, and I'll talk to you soon.